Hello, Julian. It's your good friend James here. Say hi.
Hello.
And today we are talking about Marvel's Avengers by Square Enix, which I do believe you got to get a bit hands-on with today. Is that right?
Yeah, so what I got to play through basically was the intro that's going to be into the game. It was very much the tutorial. You got an introduction to each of the 5 characters. You're defending the Golden Gate Bridge, which is under attack from this unknown force of sort of mercenaries, though they're being led by Taskmaster. The tutorial starts off with you taking control of Thor, and basically this is showing off like how the combat's going to be working, which is he's got light attacks, heavy attacks, he can block, he can throw Mjolnir, whereas when in God of War the axe sort of hits an enemy and then you sort of wrench it back out of them. In this, just to show how powerful Thor is, when you hit an enemy with Mjolnir, they just fly off into the distance. Which is just brilliant to play with. Like, it was really fun and lively, and there was punch to it. And of course, then as soon as you try and attack another enemy, he just puts his arm up, pulls the hammer back, and you just whack them in the face with the hammer. The combat's fantastic. And so you go from Thor, and then you move to Iron Man, and so he's one of the big differences from him versus Thor is that sort of he's able to hover and fly, and so his section starts off, you're chasing these guys on jetpacks and firing your repulsors from your hands and taking them out of the air, but then you obviously slam back down into the ground, and you're able to open up his chest laser beam and basically just tear through tanks, turn people in, not turn them into ash, that'd be lovely, but you basically just burn them to the ground. Each of the heroes all do actually feel quite different from one another. In particular, for instance, like when you get into Hulk, he can obviously grab enemies and slam them into the ground, much like he does with
Loki in the first Avengers movie.
I know these things, truly, really I do. So what you have with Hulk is like sort of you've obviously got like a great deal of melee power, but then what he also does is whenever you see sort of these parts of the environment where there are scratch marks on it, he can leap onto those, do almost like a wall grab, and then throw himself off into the distance. Now, whether that's going to be jumping onto another set of scratch marks so he can sort of leap between buildings, or it's to sort of basically prop him just above a group of enemies and then do a massive ground slam.
Okay, did you get to play as Captain America?
Yes.
What's his movement like? Because he is, and I adore Steve Rogers, but he is just a muscular, strong bloke. So, like, I assume he just walks like he's got a New York minute to spare?
So, unlike every other character who's on the Golden Gate Bridge, Captain America is on the helicarrier, and so basically he's on the bridge of that, and these mercenaries have come into the bridge, and he's basically stood there defending the bridge from them. So he doesn't have a great deal of movement. He basically stays in the same spot, and you're throwing your shield around, you're punching people to the ground, you're knocking them up into the air, and then hitting them in the chin with your shield. And it's like, in Winter Soldier, it's a bit like in the elevator fight scene, where it's
great scene, the best scene.
And so it's like sort of this sense of here is Cap able to take on a whole room full of people. Like when he's charged up his super heroic ability, he basically just flings his shield off into the nearest wall, and it just bounces between every single enemy in the room. It's really cool.
I was really looking forward to this game. It was a bit underwhelming at E3, but judging by your reaction, it looks like we're back on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things which I really want to talk about is what we played in the intro section is really cool, but it's essentially an intro. It's like sort of getting you to grips with a couple of different heroes and giving you a sense of what you need to do in the terms of combat and so on. But like what they then did after we played was we went into another room and we had them break down how the game is structured. And so there's a campaign and there's co-op, and the way they call these are hero missions and war zones. And the way that the hero missions work, and I don't think this was clear at E3, though they definitely reference this, so the hero missions are all single player. So there was certainly a concern that this was a game which was only going to be co-op or only multiplayer, and that's not the case. Like every single one of these hero missions can be played in single player, are only playable in single player. You have a particular hero who is set to that mission, and the whole mission is built around that hero's abilities. So for instance, if you're playing as Hulk, then you'll be having missions which have destructible environments. Whereas if you're playing with Iron Man, then you have these much larger open levels. It's almost like a flight combat sim, because obviously Iron Man is able to just fly through the sky, and he's got his repulsors, he's got his lasers, he's got his rockets, he's going to be taking down aerial targets, as well as obviously having some melee. But like it plays to the different hero strengths. I imagine with Black Widow they're going to be much more stealthy, lots of silent takedowns, but they didn't talk about that, so that's me just speculating. Now, Warzones, the way they work is they're up to 4-player co-op. They didn't make it clear in the presentation, and it seems like it's something they're going to talk about later down the line. You can definitely play them in single player, and you don't need to have anyone else with you. I think the suggestion is going to be that there's AI companions if you want them, but otherwise you can play it in 4-player co-op. And the way it works is that everyone who's playing, they can pick any hero from their roster and they can play that mission. So you'll be in these play spaces which are not specifically designed for a single hero, but those spaces will all include elements that the different heroes can take advantage of. So, for instance, I imagine you'll find levels where there are those scratch marks that Hulk can leap from. But if you don't have Hulk in the team with you, then no one can use them. But if you do have Hulk, then he can take advantage of that. And similarly, I'm sure you'll have other sections where it's sort of, this is where we would use an aerial unit if we had Iron Man, or this is where Thor would be able to knock people out with his hammer from long distance.
It sounds to me like it's the superhero game we've been after for a long time.
Yeah, so there's a whole other system which is really exciting to see, and it's basically that there's a huge amount of loot in this game. Like, so there's cosmetic skins, much like you had with Spider-Man, and as you'd expect from any sort of superhero movie. So you can sort of have different versions of Iron Man, which you've seen in the films, seen in the comics. But there's also on top of that this whole gear system. So it's basically every single one of the heroes can slot in different equipment that they find and are rewarded for in completing their hero missions, in completing their war zones. And they all give different buffs. So, for instance, like the way that your heroes are broken down in their power is that they have skill trees, which they can unlock different abilities. So, for instance, with Iron Man, you might want to put your skills into opening up different tech trees. So, at the start of the game, you only have access to his repulsors, but as you go through the game, you could choose to unlock laser abilities or rocket abilities. But with the gear, the power of Iron Man is broken down to his melee attack, his ranged attack, his hero abilities, and his defense. And your gear can buff those, as well as sort of augmenting the skills that you have. So, for instance, you might have gear which would add a little area of effect damage to a headshot, or if you've got like a full set of gear, like you can get themed gears which once you get the sets they have an extra bonus. Might sort of add it that you have this flechette attack, so it's basically when you kill an enemy, then it does a bigger area effect which hits all the other enemies in the area.
Are these gears, you talk about a set, are they cosmetic changes too?
It didn't look like they were. I think it's basically that you pick your skin, and then what happens is you can change the innards of your character.
That's pretty cool, I like that.
It's one of those systems which we will know how well it plays once we actually have our hands on it, but it seems to be massive. It's one of those things where this is what's going to make this game very, very replayable. I mean, we already know that Warzones can be replayed, single-player missions can be replayed. Like, it's a really cool system.
I mean, we can't talk it up too much, but it sounds like we're getting the game that I wanted since I was a kid. Like an actual superhero game that is going to keep me invested for a long time.
And that's the thing, like, as I said earlier, I wasn't that excited after E3. After what I played today, it's just shot to the top of my interest. Like, I can't wait till May 2020. In my mind, potentially going to be as good as Marvel Spider-Man, and I think Marvel Spider-Man was one of the best games of 2018.
It's a bold claim, and that's where we'll end the video. Thank you, Julian, for everything, and thank you, me, for being me. Bye, love you all.